Alex McGregor. I've been a cook for over 20 years, and today we're going to do a little demonstration on knife sharpening. Just the basics. Knife sharpening is one of those things where you can do it for your whole life and you'll find new things. And honestly, there's a lot of really good products out there, automatic knife sharpening, gizmos and gadgets, and they all work pretty well. And if you don't feel like you want to tackle sharpening a knife, then they're good solutions. There's nothing wrong with them. This is just kind of the old-fashioned way. Clear some of this stuff out of the way. So first and foremost, sharpening stone. A lot of them will come with a rough and then a smooth. I tend to just like ones that are all smooth or smooth and smoother. Some of those real rough ones will just take tons of material off your knife, which will not, not good for the longevity of the knife. You want to start by submerging your stone in water, usually half hour, something like that. Not too long, but not a couple minutes, which is what I'm going to do today. And then I usually take a beat up old kitchen towel of some sort. Yeah.
My father always used to use oil.
So oil, most of the knives we have today are stainless steel or carbon steel, which are a little bit softer. Now, if you're sharpening a tool, like an axe or woodworking tools or things like that, those are made out of a different kind of steel called A1 tool steel usually, which is much harder. So oil is better for that because it reduces heat and the viscosity is higher, so there's less friction. I think you can get oil stones for sharpening knives. Like a lot of hunting knives will also be some sort of like fancier steel with a bunch of different stuff in it. But for a kitchen knife, I think water stones are the way to go. It's just easier. And you never know what's in that oil. So that's something you gotta think of too, like food safety. Like, here's this oil I'm putting on the stone, like what, do I wanna eat that oil? Or would I rather have water? And I think water is just a little bit more safe as far as kitchen knives go. All right, so you got your wet stone. Now the knife, if you look at it, usually under some light, you'll see a different color, a little thin stripe of metal that goes down that's actually the beveled edge of the knife. The Japanese call that the blade road. That's the part you're looking to sharpen. And there's a lot of different, again, gizmos and gadgets out there that'll help you to get a very specific angle. And unless you're cutting sushi, I don't think the specific angle really matters a whole lot. The trick is for you to be consistent. So pick an angle and try to be consistent to reproduce that angle. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, they say at school they taught us it should be like a matchbook. So about 40 degrees, but you don't have to match it exactly as long as you reproduce that angle every time. So, and there's a couple different movements that people do. Some people prefer like a rounded, like that. And then again on the reverse side. Some cooks, depending on the type of knife you have, prefer a straight. And you just kind of do that. Which, if you're trying to learn and you're matching angles, that can be a little easier than trying to do a swoop. Can be a little tougher to get your angle correct. Sometimes this is a little bit better, a little bit easier rather, to match your angle.
Can you go back and forth?
So, yeah, and you're kind of just pushing and then pulling, and maybe a little extra little wiggle at the tip. Again, this is a very personalized thing. Like everyone's going to have their own method and everyone's going to have their own way of doing it within a certain parameter. You just have to figure out what works best for you. And the only way to really tell is, you know, the sharpness. One important thing is, especially in the beginning, is counting. You know, say you do 1, 2, 3 swipes on that side, you want to do equal swipes on the other side. Kind of logical, you know.
Now, how much pressure are you using? I know it's hard to say.
2 fingers. You know how the dentist is like, oh, brush your teeth with like 2 fingers worth of pressure? It's similar. I mean, you want to put enough, but not, you know, you don't want to gouge into the stone. I mean, you see a lot of that with people just learning. They'll put too much pressure and the knife will actually cut into the stone. And then you'll get like chunks or divots or like waves. You have to be very even with it, but it's not a lot of pressure. I mean, if I had to guess, less than a pound. I mean, just sort of like you're petting a dog. I think that's probably a good metaphor for that.
Figures I have a cat.
Yeah, well, it depends how rough you get with petting a cat. So, and you just sort of, you keep working at it, and you just feel. Now, again, this is kind of a basic thing, but you never want to test the sharpness of your knife going that way. You're always kind of doing this. And you can start to feel an edge develop. And it's just something that comes with time. You'll kind of get the thing of it, but definitely just this way. Any little lateral movement, you're going to slice your finger for sure. So that's a very, very delicate thing. Now, a lot of people don't want to touch the blade. So you just get a piece of paper and of course it's not very sharp. And you just do little, you know, cuts like that. And that's getting there. That's not quite where it ought to be, but it's definitely getting there. So the thing that will happen when it gets really sharp is you'll develop what's called a wire edge, where the metal gets so thin that it's like paper thin and it starts to kind of wave back and forth, or it'll curl to one side or the other, and you'll feel it because you go like that or you go like that, and you'll feel like a little catch kind of, and that's where it's like razor sharp. But you've got to get rid of that wire edge. And there's a couple ways to do that. One is with one of these things, which you go into professional kitchens or you watch TV shows and they're like, you know, they're just going to town on it, you know, back and forth as fast as they can. I don't prescribe to that because I think you're not being careful enough. And so this is a steel, not a sharpening tool. This is specifically just for getting rid of the wire edge, or sometimes when it's super thin at the point of it, it'll do this. So you need to straighten it or get rid of the wire edge. And again, you want to match that angle. And you count gently, super gently with one of these. And that'll help sort of develop that edge to get it, you know, not super necessary. Not everybody uses one of these. It's handy. Last time I was here, I brought in the diamond coated one of these, which I forgot this time, which is my favorite tool, because in the kitchen you take the diamond coated one and you do 1, 2, 1, 2, and it's sharp again. And you haven't removed a ton of material like you do with a stone. I love those. Diamond coated steels are great. Now after you've refined the edge with that, a trick I learned from an old Japanese guy. So you take some newspaper. Now what you're doing here is just kind of polishing it and removing burrs. And you just, again, you try to match that angle and you push pull. And you just kind of drag it on the newspaper a couple times on each side. And that'll help polish it. And that'll be the difference between like super sharp or super duper razor sharp. Which, this newspaper is the wrong thing.
It's not actually newspaper, newspaper.
Right.
Print, I think it's,
So some kind of actual paper stock will help you do these cuts. So then you know, like, it's pretty sharp. Now this is a paring knife, so it's not going to get as razor sharp. For some reason, I can never get paring knives to be like shave sharp, like you can like with a real chef knife. I don't know if this, I don't know why. That's just my personal thing. But I mean, it's pretty sharp. Any questions? You probably know how to sharpen knives pretty darn good.
I use machines.
Yeah.
I've never, I've seen lots of people using stones, and I've seen different kinds of stones. Ones I've seen particular people is a three-sided triangle, and they're usually 15 inches long or something like that.
Yeah, those are nice, especially if you have a big chef knife.
Yeah.
And again, it's just different grits. So it's a coarse, a medium, and a fine.
Right.
And those are great, if you can afford them.
I'm curious if you have a knife that like kind of somebody abused and it has like a divot in it. Can you get something out of this to make it work again?
The divot is an interesting thing because typically when you try to repair that with some sort of gadget, it'll get caught, and it's really tough. Now with a stone, and if you've got a chunk out of the blade, you can grind it down and get it so that it's more integrated in the blade, and it won't inhibit the cutting very much.
Oh, cool.
But the only way to fix that sort of thing is with a stone. Like, it's very tough to integrate a divot with some sort of a drag-through gizmo.
Then my next question would be, you talked about having a smooth stone. You could utilize it in the way that you just used this one. Because like I have a stone at home, and somebody that I know picked it up and said it was a polishing stone, and meaning that it was like really, really smooth. And I'm just wondering, could I still use that to sharpen a knife?
It's possible. You can sharpen a knife with darn near anything. One of the great tricks of the kitchen is you take a ceramic plate and you flip it over, and the footing, the unglazed footing of the plate, you can actually use that as a sharpener.
Wow.
So, I mean, you can sharpen your knife on darn near anything. A leather belt, I mean, my grandfather was a barber, and, if that's how you sharpen a razor blade is on a piece of leather. So, like, you can sharpen on a variety of things, and some stones out in the wild, sure. The only problem is the flatness of it. The flatter your stone, the more consistent your sharpening is going to be. So if you've got a stone that's like convex, or it's got some waves to it, like it may not sharpen your blade evenly. But in a pinch, like any abrasive surface, really.
That's good to know.
Yeah. The one thing though, if you do that plate trick where you flip it over, or a mug, or anything ceramic, because when they bake it, they don't want it to stick, so they never glaze that little footing on the bottom. You will, like my fingers get this kind of, the metal filings or whatever. The bottom of the plate will get that gray smear, which is tough to get out. So a lot of people, like the owner of the restaurant, will come back, who's been sharpening knives on my plate? Or if you stack the plates, that one you sharpen the knife on, it's gonna leave this nice gray ring right in the middle of that white plate. So that's not like ideal. But in a pinch, if your knife is dull and...
I inherited a steel from my father. How do I know whether it's a plain one or a diamond one?
So that one has lines in it, little thin lines.
Yeah.
The diamond one, if you inherited it, it's probably not diamond coated. That's within the last 20 years maybe.
No.
So
It's No, it's probably 100
The
years
diamond
old
ones
for all
look-
I know.
Diamond ones look a little bit like graphite too.
Yeah, like a gray.
They have kind of a flat gray appearance.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you hold them in the light, you can see the little flickers of the
Flickers,
little
okay.
bits of diamond. in it.
It's been sitting in a drawer for a long time.
It's a tough tool. I mean, I have one of these at home. I honestly, I don't use it very often. Just because I have one of the diamond coated ones. And in the restaurant, for me, it's like, am I gonna take 10 minutes to put my knife on the stone and do the whole thing? Or am I gonna take the diamond coated one and go, and it's razor sharp again? So that's handy. But with anything, those only work so much. Even with the diamond coated ones, you know, once a month, once every 2 months, I gotta break out the stone and redevelop that blade road. Because it'll get worn and it won't be exactly right, and it'll be thicker in places and thinner in others. And the stone is just so consistent to develop that bevel. And again, with a lot of those pull-through tools, they just aren't quite as consistent. If you get the knack of the stone. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of one of those skills that's, if you like doing things the old-fashioned way. I mean, it's kind of, and a lot with the old-fashioned stuff, that's a little better. You'll definitely get a little bit sharper knife on one of these than one of the gadgets. So,
Alex, will this, how about serrated knives?
So I will say serrated knives don't need to be sharpened as often, because typically what you're cutting with a serrated knife isn't tough. It's not something that's going to wear down the blade as much. That said, after a couple years, your serrated knife is definitely going to have some signs of wear. I mean, I hate to say it, but like serrated knives, the quality of the steel isn't as important. So going out and buying a new one is probably your best option. If you want to get super crazy and you want to sharpen that thing, you go pick up a chainsaw file, which are round.
Yeah.
And you have to bring your knife with you because they make different diameters of those chainsaw files. And that you can, because there's a little groove, you can go in there with a chainsaw file and do one motion. Don't saw it or anything like that. It's just one motion, holding the knife like that away from you, and like 1 or 2 passes. And you'll go down and then flip over the knife and then do it again. It's a super pain in the butt, but it works pretty good. But again, serrated knives don't tend to get dull too much, so I've honestly maybe sharpened a serrated knife once or twice in my whole life. So, but that's a good question, for sure. Because those you don't want to take and put it through a pull-through gizmo, because it doesn't work.
And am I one of the few that rarely washes my serrated knife? Because I cut bread with it, it's like, put it back in the block. I don't even think about it.
Depends what you're cutting.
Like if I'm just cutting bread with it, which is what I mostly do.
I mean, the thing with knife blocks is you don't want to introduce moisture into the knife block, because then you're going to have fungus, because fungus spores are everywhere. And that's one of the things with food safety, which maybe we should do at one of our talks, food safety maybe.
Yeah.
Moisture is the big one. The drier you keep something, the less likely something is going to grow on it. So if that blade is bone dry and all you've done is cut some bread, the other thing with that is, let's hope all the yeast in the bread is dead, because you might have some smear of yeast on the blade, and then you throw it in your knife block and you've just introduced the fungus into your knife block. So, but again, if it's super dry, your relative humidity's low, it's like working in a bakery. Everything goes in the oven. It's like an autoclave in a surgery.
Right.
Everything is sanitized in that oven. So I've worked in a couple of professional bakeries where they do not wash the sheet trays, ever. because nothing lives on that thing. It's going into a 350-degree oven. That kills everything.
Right.
So
I don't have to feel too guilty about it.
no, I mean, as a professional, I tend to be like super anal, which is, I think is a good quality for a professional chef. You want them to be like very particular about food safety. As a home cook,
That's really my only thing. I'm really clean except for that one thing. I don't need to wash the bread knife for some reason.
yeah, like I said, as long as it's dry,
Yeah.
you know, that's your main concern. So,
Do you
yeah.
have any tips for washing knives? I mean, is there something you should do? I mean, obviously, you don't want to rub it against a metal sink.
Ever put it in a dishwasher. Ever. Ever. Like, I can't stress that enough. Because depending on how good your dishwasher is, the temperature rises up and you start to soften the metal. Or you start to mess with your handle material.
Where the motor vibrates the knife against
Yeah.
whatever else is in there.
Right, for sure. It's stuck in with all the rest of the silverware and it's like clang, 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 you know. Yeah. So hand washing, for sure. If you want to get super like covetous of your knives, I don't tend to use the green scrubby side of the sponge. I use the soft side of the sponge, just so you're not scraping up the metal. But, I mean, other than that, warm soap and water. Yeah. If you have wooden handles, you want to make sure those are never submerged. And when you finish washing them, dry them off. Because most wooden handles will absorb water, can mess with the glue, it can kind of shift around, it can get, you know, if it's submerged, some stuff can kind of creep between the metal and the wood. So wooden handled knives are definitely a little bit more high maintenance to some degree. But getting them wet's not going to do anything. It's only if you just like, you got a mug of water and or you throw it. That's another thing. Never throw a knife into a sink. Like, man, in a professional kitchen, the dishwasher will lose his mind. If he's digging around in the sink and up comes a knife, you're like, who did that?
When I worked at a sushi restaurant down in Florida, they always had the knives facing out too. Like if you're like down flat,
Like on the cutting
blade away
board or,
from you.
yeah. Yep, that way you're not going around and you bump it.
Yeah.
Especially a sushi knife,
Yeah.
because those things are crazy sharp.
Yeah.
And you can literally just touch your knife and to your finger like that with a sushi knife. And,
They have to cut them like that.
Yikes.
and well, fish is so difficult to cut. Fish is like, your knife skills really shine through when you're cutting fish because it's so fragile. And the instant you start doing this, it just tears it all up. I mean, you see a sushi chef and they are just like one motion. You know, they're not back and forth. It's just like, and you can tell them, you could tell the cut on that, which is why I'm not a sushi chef. But I think maybe at some point in the future too, we'll probably do like a knife skills demonstration. Dicing, mincing,
That'd be awesome. I thought that's what we were doing.
stuff
today,
like
too.
that.
I've never been good at that.
Yeah, it's a practice thing. You know, if
I
you're,
learned incorrectly, you know?
yeah, and if you're a professional and you're doing it for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, you can't help but kind of get good at it, you know. But yeah, we'll definitely do that at some point too. Knife safety, knife skills kind of thing. Today I just wanted to focus on sharpening. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much all the material I have.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no
Yes,
problem.
thank you.